welcome back to another small job, which I think might be subtitled, Is it scrap or can it be saved? I've been taking off as many of the outside fittings as I can. It's very early on a Sunday morning, and there aren't that many that I can do single-handed, but this is one of them. So this, quite nice brass by the look of it. I've had a little go at it and it seems to be brass underneath. This is a little ventilation mushroom from the top of the cabin. I don't think it does much in the way of ventilation, but I think it would be quite nice to save it. I don't really want to go spending too much money on the boat because that would kind of defy the point of buying a cheap boat. And I don't know if I'm going to need more ventilation in this. I suspect I will, but that's something I can address down the line. So onto the internet I go, and AI comes up with something I can do right now because I don't need to buy anything, I don't need to wait for anything to be delivered, and it just involves three things. So I'm going to give it a whirl and see if it actually works. I'm also going to drop this little bad boy in at the same time because I think this is brass and we may as well. So if I move slightly out of shot, what do we need? We need a little plastic container. We need to then line it with metal foil. Now the AI says put shiny side up, but I always thought that was a myth, that there are shiny sides and there are dull sides, but I think that's how they make it in the factory. They make two sheets at a time pressed together, and one of them comes out shiny, one of them doesn't. Anyway, who am I to ignore our AI overlords? So I will put it shiny side up into the bowl. And then I'm going to put in some baking soda. It wasn't particularly specific. It said 3 tablespoons per DL. I mean, unless it's starting to talk about demiliters, I'm not sure. So I'm just going to go with, let's put in quite a lot because it's baking soda and it's cheap. And then warm water, not hot water. So I'm going to fill that up. And then it says put the thing in, making sure that it's in contact with the metal foil. It doesn't say if the whole thing has to be in contact, so I presume it doesn't. I'm going to just top that up a little bit, because apparently it's a chemical reaction. I'm sure smarter people than I will know what that chemical reaction is. Apparently we will see bubbles forming, which, if I can master the camera work, yeah, you can just about see there. Can't really see what's going underneath. It does look like there's bits of gunk coming off, although obviously that just might be because I've immersed it in water. And it says leave it for about 20 minutes. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. When it's been 20 minutes, I have turned it a couple of times. I mean, to be honest, okay, the underside looks a bit better, but as for the rest of it, I'm not really noticing a significant difference. So yeah, AI, thanks very much, but I don't think you're taking over the world of brass polishing anytime soon, which means... But a bit more research has suggested that rather than have to wait for something to turn up, there is another household product that might actually work this time. So in the interests of nothing ventured, nothing gained, let me introduce you to the tomato ketchup. Apparently it is not particularly complicated. You take the tomato ketchup and you pour it onto the brass or bronze or whatever it is, and then you smear it about. Now, I have to say, I absolutely detest tomato ketchup. You could do this with brown sauce, but to me that would be a complete waste of a perfectly fine condiment. So to my mind, this is a good way to get rid of some. I'll chuck that in the bin, which is rapidly filling up with blue cloth, and apparently we just leave it for an hour. I don't know how. So I guess it's time to see if it's actually done anything. If I'm honest, initial indications aren't particularly promising, but some of it looks almost brown. But I think that given the cost of the amount of tomato ketchup that will probably be needed to bring this back into life, I think it's probably time to fall back on the chemicals. I know I said I was going to go chemical on it, and given the state of the Travellers, which turned out all right, I was considering trying the rust stain remover trick and a lot of sanding on this as well. However, I decided to go very old school and something that I didn't know was still made, which is Brasso. The house I grew up in had an awful lot of brass door handles, and so once a month they would all be covered in Brasso and left for an hour or so, during which time I would inevitably walk around opening doors left, right and centre and transferring all the Brasso onto my hands. Anyway, today I'm not going to do that. I'm going to transfer the Brasso onto the mushroom, and in accordance with whatever rule number it is, I'm going to read the instructions. It's perhaps not quite as dramatic a transformation as the Travellers, but it's definitely getting there in places. So I'm going to let that just sort of sit for a bit, I suppose, and then come back and maybe give it another turn in about an hour or so. Right, well, after an hour it hasn't come out particularly well, so I think I'm going to take the executive decision to try out the chemical approach again. It's quite big, so I'm going to put it in a bag and soak it that way, rather than try and cover it all in a pot of some kind. And we'll see how we go. Hopefully it'll turn out the same way as the Travellers did. Right. It's about 2 days since I last touched this brass bell, because we tried chemical like aluminium foil plus water plus salt plus baking soda, whatever that was. That didn't work. We tried tomato ketchup. That didn't work. Brasso didn't work. Putting it in the, where is it? Putting it in this stuff didn't have the same results as with the Travellers. Since then, I have tried this, which is supposedly a polishing set, which you get from Toolstation for a £5. It doesn't work. All it does is it showers little white fibres all over your workplace. Doesn't actually do anything else. I also found this tucked away in a corner of my garage. I don't really know what it's for, but by this stage I was willing to try pretty much anything. Unfortunately, it congealed into a big blue lump, so I didn't get to try that. I did use the mouse. I also used the orbital sander, both with 240 grit, going quite slowly. In the interest of trying absolutely everything, even though the Dremel, which is not a Dremel, doesn't come with a cutting attachment, it came with a sanding attachment, but that ripped through it as though it was made of butter, so I stopped that pretty quickly. I did, however, use the wire attachment to get in some hard to reach places, and I used the wire brush on the drill. All of which is a very long-winded way of saying basically sanding it worked and nothing else did. And this is the end result. One ventilation mushroom, complete with spinny action to make it go up and down. I think it looks pretty decent. So I'm going to pop it in a corner and hopefully put it back on the boat before not too long.